Sirisha brings a 30 plus years of global executive experience spanning research lab, product engineering, strategy, merger and acquisitions, business development and consulting across public and private sector. Most recently, she was a managing director at JP Morgan Chase, leading architecture and data digital for consumer bank. She was a first woman MD of JP Morgan Chase in India. Prior to that, she was the executive vice president of architecture, data and technology services for MasterCard and led the MasterCard India as a chairman of MasterCard India board. She was the first group executive leader in technology for Masterclass outside US during her tenure as an India head of Mastercard, and Mastercard was chosen as one of the best places to work at. She is currently the managing director at JCPenney. Over to you, Sirisha.
The session that I was asked to do this afternoon is the journey of a woman leader rising to the top. Now, if anybody asks me this question, as to how the journey was, the one answer that I would have, or the one-word answer that I would really have, is it's tough. It's never easy. It's never easy to be the only person in a room. It's never easy to be the only person raising a voice in that room, just amongst male colleagues. And it's never easy to raise your hand or be the only one to raise your hand on a couple of issues. But I also cringe every time somebody calls me for this topic because I'm conflicted in my mind. And, for the fact that we still talk about women leadership after 75 years of independence and many, many more years of the industry existing. So it's sort of, and I get called for a lot of these women leadership sessions, as well as, considering I work in I've been working for American entities, they call me for these sessions around women of color and things like that. And I actually, so I'm really conflicted about various things. But, I think there is a reason, and there continues to be a reason as to why we should speak for ourselves. And there are a couple of statistics that I wanted to call out in the room today. So and I think all of us know that it's still a struggle for women at the top. There are really not too many women at the top, right? And the numbers clearly call out for themselves. So if we talk about heads of state, for instance, 190 heads of state, 9 of them are women. If we look across parliaments across the globe, 13% representation of women. If we look at CX positions, again, across various companies across the globe, it stands between 15 and 16%. Really, really low numbers. And if I look at the nonprofit organizations, a place where we probably expect a lot more women, that number is at 20%. So really, really low numbers in terms of, the reason why we should probably continue to talk about this topic. And I think we certainly have an issue here, and where women face harder choices in terms of professional success and personal fulfillment. There was a survey that was done, recently about senior managers in organizations. And if you again look at the percentages, the senior managers who were men who had children was 2/3 of the male population. And the senior managers, women who had children, was about 1/3 of the population, which already talks about how the numbers go south as women rise up the ladder. So I think certainly something all of us need to do. I see a lot of men in the room, so there is room for what and how we can do as we help the journeys, right? How are we going to fix this? How are we going to change the numbers at the top? How do we make this different? Well, I think lots and lots of questions for all of us to ponder about, certainly. And I know I have a couple of messages. I'm not really answering questions like, the flex time or mentoring during this session, but a few points that I would like to make, especially for the women. I know work is an individualistic choice that each one of us have and make. But for those of you who want to continue to work, a little bit of advice that I can give you from my journey of 31 plus years in the industry. 1, sit at the table. I think it's extremely important to get these seats at the table, to voice your own opinion and to stand for many more that are not able to voice their opinion. Now, there are many, many surveys, and I'm sure all of you have heard this, right? I just consider men and women for a moment. A guy would probably raise his hand for a job if he's 50% ready for the job. But in, the same case with a woman, even if she's 90% ready for the job and you're actually telling her that she's ready to take the job, she'll probably find a reason why she's not ready. She says, maybe I need to improve on this skill. Maybe I'm not, there's this little bit I need to learn before I take up this role, and so on. So I think, and I believe so because I've gone through this myself, women systematically, I think, underestimate their own abilities, right? And when you ask men, for instance, questions on things like GPAs, for instance, they'd probably go wrong slightly on the higher side. But girls might slightly go wrong on the lower side, right? So, and the same carries forward with respect to, negotiations regarding compensation, for instance. A guy, even for his first salary, is probably, negotiating on that first salary. And again, statistics prove that 57% of men actually negotiate on their first compensation package. While women, that number is at an appalling 7%. So we really don't speak for ourselves, I think. We don't raise our hand enough, and we don't keep our hand raised long enough, I guess. Again, another thing, men potentially attribute their success to themselves a lot of times. But when somebody asks me, for instance, you've probably been successful, what is the reason? I'd give 10 reasons why I've probably succeeded in a job. It'll be my family, it'll be my husband, it'll be, colleagues that have probably helped me get there, and so on and so forth, right? And I think there is a problem with that. And all of us should recognize that. And I'm speaking more to the girls than the boys here. Because nobody gets a seat or gets that corner office if one is not able to represent oneself, leave alone somebody else representing you, right? And you don't get a promotion, again, if you don't attribute your success to yourself. If you're going to have 10 other people that you attribute your success to, then definitely, I think somebody else gets that promotion or seat. I wish the answers were very easy. I know there are lots of complexities in life, and I really, really wish the answers to some of these questions were easy, and I could tell a lot of the girls, just believe in yourself, negotiate, and own your success. But it's really not that simple. Again, many analysis and studies done actually prove this point. Success and likability for men are positively correlated, right? And I'll give you an example of why. But for women, success and likability are negatively correlated, right? Which really means if there's a woman who's highly successful, I'm not too sure how many in the organization are, love her for the way she is, right? And all of us know this for a fact. There was a study that was actually done by the Harvard Business School that lays this out very well. So there was this lady called Heidi Roy, who was a venture capitalist, did extremely well, and rose to the top. And there was some various case studies that were done, and this professor in the Harvard Business School actually gave this to two groups of students. In one, he gave the name Heidi Roy, of course, and in the second, he changed Heidi to Harvard. And I'll tell you how the results panned out. The group that was actually reviewing Harvard thought that he was amazing, he owned his success, and people did want to work in his team because of the way he was, extremely aggressive and whatever. The guys that worked on the other case study, which was Heidi, felt that they were a little iffy. Would they join Heidi's team? They were not sure. They thought she was political. Exactly the same. I mean, the only change that there was just the change of name. And that's what happens. And they were not really sure if they wanted to join her team, right? So that's the first one in terms of, you need a seat at the table, keep your hand raised, and speak for yourself. Irrespective, there are going to be a lot of negativity, a lot of feedback that you might get. But if your compass is pointing to the true north, then ensure you stick to, what you stand for. The second, make your partner a real partner, whether it's at home or in the workplace. And I've seen Anand Mahindra, I think, tweeted this a couple of years, he tweeted this on Women's Day, I think, and I hate the fact that we celebrate Women's Day, but, well, the tweet was awesome, or the image was awesome. So he had men and women, on this athletic track, and the guy had no obstacles on his way, and he was getting to his finish point. But for the women, there were a ton of obstacles. It felt like a steeplechase, where you have the clothes, you have your kid, you have a ton of other things, I think, to cater to as you go through this race. Again, and we've seen this in many of our homes. Pardon me if I'm not generalizing, I'm just talking about, a large part of us that probably have to deal with this, where a woman and a man have similar jobs, they're earning potentially the same thing, and they have a child. I really feel, and I'm not demeaning anybody, but I just think, one of them probably has, it's like doing 2 or 3 jobs. You take care of your home, you take care of the job, and you probably spend 3 times the amount of effort on childcare. So it's just not easy, for you to kind of manage all of this. And we've seen this in the workplace as well, where during the pandemic, right, there was a 10% additional drop of women from the workforce, and especially at the mid-level, and I think that's where it hurts most. Because we have a lot of people that are joining, it's 50-50 at the entry level, so that's great. Or even, whatever it is, we try and make it close. And as you're growing, you see that the drop rate for women is actually increasing. And that's the place where I think they need a lot of help from many of you in terms of just that little bit of hope and support that is required so that they continue in the workforce. And it's important to have a diverse workforce, and I think all of us agree to that, right? And coming from the payment industry, I see this quite a bit because a lot of the payment decisions are actually influenced by women, close to 75%. So having them on your design teams, having them on your product teams is extremely important. And if we don't have them, I'm not too sure, we spoke product, I think, in the previous session. I'm not sure you're able to or will be able to design products that are good enough for a large customer base that we have, which predominantly is, of course, diverse. So I think it's extremely important in terms of, having them in the workforce and helping them continue in the workforce, right? I know as a society, we do probably put a lot more pressure on the men in terms of success, but for women, it's not so. And especially in our society, right? I've been through this myself, where a lot of times somebody's told me, well, his career is important, maybe you can take a break. Why would you want to take a break? Because it's the same time that both of us need to hit the pedal, and success is as important for each other, of course, and you really need to see how you can work through, and so it's important to have a partner at the workplace and at home who's a true partner. And we've seen that again in statistics, where societies where the partners share 50% of the responsibility, I think the divorce rates are way, way lower as well. The third one, don't leave before you leave. Right? Whether it is at the workplace or as an individual for yourself. Now, I've seen this again in a lot of teams, right? We do the planning on teams and things like that. Now, every time we have a girl on the team, there is a lot of fear, especially, in the mid-20s to early 30s, right? You're scared to have women on the team because they might go off on maternity leave and you're not able to replace that job wreck, right? And so that's going to be open for a long time. So it could be 9 months of maternity leave, another 8 months of childcare, and by the time somebody comes back, it's close to 2 years. And can you afford to not have that position filled for that period of time? There's a lot of fear I see in teams and in organizations. And what is that leading to, right? And that's where I said, raising your hand and keeping your hand raised. A lot of times we instill that fear in the girls as well, where they, if you're just married and you're planning a family, they don't even raise their hand for some jobs. And that's a big problem that we have. The only jobs that I see a lot of girls in, And I think the representation is decent is in roles like Scrum Masters or somebody that's managing a product and getting teams together, but not, and those are by design, don't have too much of a career path, right? So I think that's the problem, that we have in organizations where, because of the thought process that we have, we're actually making somebody not even aspire for certain roles. So I think it's very important for us to support this in our little ways, and to ensure that the girls on the team or the women in the organization don't stop looking for opportunities and hit the gas pedal when they need to, right? Because it's extremely important. And for many that have children too, right? You probably have a super important meeting and your child is unwell on that day. Somebody at home just tells you, it's okay. I mean, why don't you just take care of your child, and somebody else maybe can take care of the meeting. It's not really slow because you've actually slogged for it, right? And that's where you need that little extra support. Maybe for girls who've been in the industry longer, you've spent over 10, 15 years in the industry, you've figured a way out. And then, I think they can manage their careers a lot better. But it's during that initial phase, when that support, I think, is absolutely required. There are also many, many stats which talk about, women in leadership positions and how those organizations can be more nurturing and more caring and actually, do really well in terms of growth. But then I think there is a need, and as I said, that population is super small, and there's definitely a need for all of us to support that. My generation, unfortunately, I'm not too sure how much we can move the needle because, from 13% to take it to 50%, that's a long haul, and I'm not sure that's going to happen. But definitely for the generations to come and for the younger ones, I think it's extremely important that we provide these opportunities in terms of seats at the table, in terms of equal opportunities that we can give, as well as, encouraging them not to give up before they actually should, right? And I think in our own, and especially in India, I mean, there's this Sanskrit shloka, and I don't know how many of you know this. We already typecast girls, I think, and the expectation is maybe a superwoman that we need to create. And this is how it goes. Karyeshu dasi, karaneshu mantri, rupecha lakshmi, kshamaya dharitri, bhojyeshu mata, shayanecha veshya, shadkarma yukta, kuladharma patni. What does this mean? You expect her to do everything. That's the karyeshu dasi. Karaneshu mantri, you expect her to advise. You expect her to be, very pretty and beautiful. Rupecha Lakshmi. Kshamaya Dharitri, you expect her to excuse anybody for mistakes. She's the one that feeds, so Bhojeshu Mata. And she's also the one that, provides the comfort and everything else. So there are these 6 amazing traits that somebody needs to have, and you've already boxed them into them. And this reminds me of the story of that elephant. How many of you have seen small elephants? There's this little wooden peg that they're tied to, right? And when it's young, it just moves forward and backward around that peg, believing that it just can't get itself off that peg and it doesn't have the energy and the strength. As the elephant grows and it becomes this amazingly majestic creature, it's still tied to that little rope, right? And it keeps moving backward and forward. It doesn't take it a second to get off that, off that peg, but it still doesn't do it. So that's the story of many of us, where we are kind of boxed from childhood. We already have all these shackles, and it's extremely difficult to get off these shackles unless there is, a little support that organizations or families can provide for us to, at least ask for the sort of opportunities that we truly deserve. The other thing, now, organizations, I think, more than society, have actually done a lot in terms of pay parity, in terms of gender parity, in terms of equal opportunities, and so on. But there's still a few areas that we need to work on to help ourselves. And I keep talking about the 5 C's. The first one is competency. Now, for anybody, man, woman, I think it's extremely important to have a back pocket skill that people can come to, right? Every time they have a question in a particular domain, you should be the go-to person for that. And I think it's extremely, extremely important to have or to be super good at that one, one area that you have, an area of expertise. The second is courage and confidence. And that comes to rescue on multiple occasions, whether raising your hand, whether asking for a seat at the table, whether it's negotiating your own compensation, whatever it is. It takes a lot to stand up and speak if you are the only person in the room. And I think you need to train yourself to have that courage and confidence to be able to speak up. For yourself first, and then, of course, for many like you. The next is communication. I think that's extremely important. Whether it's written communication, oral communication, no amount of training and investment into this is enough. I think you should continue to keep investing in how do you communicate better without probably, demeaning anybody else or without ruffling anybody else's feathers, but you're able to put your point across the table the way it should. The last one is compass. I think you should ensure, and that's more your integrity, in terms of always pointing to the true north so that you can stand up and speak for certain topics that are very, very close to you. So I think these are some things that we should do for ourselves before anybody else does them for us. And of course, you need to seek mentorship. You need to be, top of mind for people as you're building your career and so on and so forth. And I think all of us have done this to varying degrees as we kind of grow. I know it's a long way before we can, reach a certain point where it's going to be 50% women at the corner offices. But I think it's extremely important to help ourselves as we go through this journey. And I would love to, at some point in time in life, to be able to talk about my daughter and her accomplishments rather than anything else that, all the thrills and frills around. And I would be able to talk about my son in a way that he, feel very proud for the fact that he stood up for somebody. So I think these are very, very important, and it's good that we have a good mix of people, so it's really, helping each other as we kind of go through the journey. That's about all I had. Thank you. Are there questions or no questions?
Anybody has a question?
If there are none, that's good.
Amit Khanzode. I am coming from Mumbai to attend this particular event. For so many years, we have been basically tracking these statistics. And unfortunately, every year we are seeing that they are declining to a certain extent and we are not able to reach that, right? To a certain extent, the mindset is a lot to do with it because in India, irrespective of whatever education a girl gets, still she is not thinking she is a prime earner, right? She is always taking a second fiddle to that. Now, taking a responsibility of prime earner will solve a lot of professional problem, but there are always a 4 M's which a girl has to go through, which is basically marriage, motherhood, then you have mobility and motivation. Once you reach to a particular stage, affluent stage, a lot of women drop at the age of after 40 to a certain extent. So how do you balance between to do that? Otherwise, we'll keep tracking the statistics, but they are not going to improve it.
So, well, like I said, right, being at the workplace and growing one's career is a very, very individualistic choice that one has. Now, there could be some who say, I want to be a mother, I want to be a caregiver at home. It's completely their choice. But if there are people that want to build a career because they've invested so much, 17 years of education, if you're, done your master's or whatever else, and you want to build and grow your career, I think we really need to have and provide those opportunities for that growth and not let motherhood be, something that is detrimental, one, for growth. And then actually slowly, I think, pushing a certain trait that the girl didn't have into her, saying, you can't raise your hand potentially for some opportunities because you may not be able to do it. And over time, she starts believing that she's not able to do it. Being the primary earner in the family, I think it's more a very societal thing that we have, where somebody believes, it's the man who's the primary owner, primary earner in the family, and not the woman. But I think times have changed, and especially for this generation of men, to understand that the two are equal, really, right, as you're running a family. And even after the child, it's important for both to support each other through the journey, and it's not just one person's responsibility. But I think it's really, some of these, as I said, are very, very individualistic choices that one makes. But all I wanted to say is it's extremely difficult. It's not easy for anybody, for a family, to make some of these calls. But it's important that they have this little thread of support that they can cling on to as they kind of go through that phase, because I see a lot more vulnerability on the women than the men.
Hi, my name is Ashutosh Sen. I'm from the Economic Times. Just a point to note, since the context in which we're talking, specific name, ICICI Bank has had a program within the HR teams there, where a woman in the 30s is given a necessary promotion during that phase when she's going through motherhood, or they have an intervention of that sort. How can we, and when I say we as an industry, and I'm just talking of Nasscom, institutionalize something like this, which could encourage more women? And already the industry is more women than some other sectors. How can that thing be institutionalized, is my question.
Actually, I didn't know ICICI did this. But so I think it's amazing, because that's the phase when you really need that little support. That's the phase when you actually lose a couple of years. And that's, many companies are trying to do various things. When we were in JP Morgan, we tried to do something called returnship program, where we were trying to bring women back who'd left the workplace, retrain them and reskill them, and based on aptitude, put them on certain job families and things like that. But I think it's amazing if you can support them that little bit in terms of career progression, because those are the couple of years that they lose. And I think what that leads to in times like this, where you have the great attrition wave and things like that, I think it actually increases a lot of stickiness if you're able to provide, that little additional help to people during that very vulnerable phase of one's career. And I think this is something that Nasscom should take up and probably, get all of us together and see how we can institutionalize this. I love that point. So, well, I think, okay, hi. Yeah, maybe that'll be the last question, and I see a lot of people going for lunch.
So I'm Riya, I'm from Mumbai, and I'm like at the very, very early stage of career where all the things that we talked about, like marriage or kids, have obviously not popped in. But whenever I'm making decisions, like I recently left a big company to join a very small scale startup with like 25 employees. Everyone was like, I did it because I wanted to learn more, I wanted to upskill more, and I wanted to be like, play dirty a bit. And everyone looks at it like, oh, this is the only age where you can take these risks. You can't take it after you're 35 because you're a woman. And I wanted to look like I didn't take the risk right now because of the age or of the woman. Like, I'm a woman and that's why I can't do this later. I did it, and when guys do it, we call it, oh, they want to learn more, oh, they're courageous. But when a woman does it, we end up saying she can't do it later. So she's doing it now. But
I would absolutely encourage such decisions personally, and I don't think it's a man-woman thing again. I mean, I know society's put all these, you're boxed already, and that's the reason somebody says you can't take a certain decision at some point in your career. You always can. You always can. And you can always break that stereotype that, we've put around ourselves as well, right? And if you're the first one to go that path, I'm sure there are going to be 10 others that follow that path, right? And I think many of these places, they call somebody who's successful, who's a woman, and ask her to speak, because there are issues that we go through in our career journeys. And it's even if we are able to help just another person with our own career journey by being very honest and truthful about what we've been through, I think that's a big deal, and that's how, you know, it's all these little drops that come together, and I'm sure the movements start, right? So I think you should, it's a great decision that you've taken, and I think you should continue that path, and it shouldn't be a man-woman thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And I
you.
want to ask one more, like a very small question as to, a lot of people say that women come out as a very challenging and they have to like raise their voice. But as a woman into the field for like so long, what do you think are things that actually add value that you feel make you stand out as a woman?
Well, I talked about those 5 traits, right? I think I believe in those 5 traits in terms of competency that you have to build. There's no man-woman thing there. If you're good at something, you better be good, super good at it, right? By learning, and it's a lot of hard work to be good at something. Courage and confidence, extremely important for you to be able to, even now, I mean, you've shown that. It's not easy to take a mic and stand up and speak in an event. So I think courage and confidence absolutely required. You should be able to communicate, because if, you know, somebody on the other side should be able to understand what you're saying, right? So that's extremely important. And compass. So these are the 5 things that I truly believe in that lead to one's success, and that you need to continue to invest in all your career. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sirisha, for an excellent session, and thanks, audience, for the question.